Good morning, everybody. My name is Craig McKenzie, and I have the pleasure of being the facilitator for the CanMUG meetings and for this virtual session as well. I want to thank you all for taking the time to attend our virtual meeting today. I truly hope you find the content to be valuable for your organization. This meeting is a continuation of the meeting that we had on November the 17th, and I'll talk a little bit more about that and the content from that meeting. I wanted to point out early in my introduction that much of the content in the coming presentation is in video format, so you will need to be connected through computer audio. I know there's a couple choices, but if please don't use the telephone dial-in to hear the presented audio. You'll need to be on computer. So if that's your case and you're dialed in on a phone, I strongly urge you to switch over to computer audio. Otherwise, you won't get some of the presented material that's on the videos. In terms of the format for our session today, we're going to have a short 1-minute sponsor video, and then we'll get into our main session where we're going to learn about the Maximo reimplementation in facilities maintenance over at the Toronto Transit Commission. Following Emma's presentation from the TTC, we will rebroadcast the presentations that were delivered on November 17th. So if any of you happen to have missed those, you'll get an opportunity today as well. There will be a pause in the TTC session at approximately the midway point, and that'll be to allow for any questions. To submit a question, please do so at any time during the presentation in the questions box, and at the midway point of Emma's presentation, and again at the end of the presentation, we'll gather up those questions. I'll get those to the presenter, Emma Petch, and she can answer those the best she can. With that, we'll switch over to the short sponsor video, and following that, we'll get straight into the presentation.
Research shows that finance teams spend nearly half their time on transaction processing. In other words, they spend from Monday morning to Wednesday afternoon doing tasks that could and should be automated. They receive paper or electronic documents. Then a person has to manually input all that data into Maximo, which takes a lot of time and is prone to human mistakes. We have the solution for this, and we even won a Maximo World Award for it. CanMUG, the world's first and only optical character recognition solution for IBM Maximo. Whether in finance, labor qualifications, measurements, or other Maximo modules, a simple photograph taken with a user's smartphone, for example, can be emailed directly to CanMUG, and in a matter of seconds, a record is created, image or PDF attached. Do you want to be in a position to assign your teams to more value-added tasks? Contact us. We have your solution.
Excellent. We'll now move into our main presentation, and I'm very happy to introduce Emma Petch with the Toronto Transit Commission. She'll be stepping us through the Maximo reimplementation in facilities maintenance over at the TTC, and there's some really great video work along the way that I think everybody will appreciate. We will have, as I mentioned, a midway pause for questions, so please enter questions as they come in the questions box, and I'll deal with those at those breaks. With that, we'll move into the TTC presentation. Thank you.
The scale of TTC has honestly taken me 5 years to understand. I grew up in Toronto. I took the subway everywhere as a kid. I got on a streetcar, went straight to the subway, and I never even looked twice. Now when I walk in a station, I look everywhere. We have 4.3 million square feet of roof, from Vaughan to the lakeshore, to Scarborough, to the border of Mississauga. We have stuff everywhere, and for every foot that the public uses, there is almost 5 times as much that the public never sees on a daily basis that we need to run and get Toronto where it needs to go. and welcome to my presentation. Today I'll be talking about Maximo re-implementation in facilities at the Toronto Transit Commission. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I went to McGill for mechanical engineering, and almost the weekend I graduated, I went to Algeria to implement Maximo at a power plant. If I was in plus 50, I thought I'd try minus 50 right after, so I then went to Nunavut at an open pit gold mine. So I've done a little bit of everything, a little bit of everywhere, but I've always done something around Maximo or other softwares like it, and what I say is the softer side of software, where people really integrate with the software. That kind of messy area where nothing's straightforward. I've been with facilities and the Toronto Transit Commission now for 5 years. I've worked with SAP, JDE, Maximo, Coswin, and Crystal. So in the end, it's not actually what the software looks like, but it's how people use it that matters. During my presentation, I'll use a few acronyms, so I just want to let you know what they are before we get going. So if you hear me using the following acronyms, here's what they mean. A SME, a subject matter expert. Asset is a thing that your organization derives value from, or more commonly, what you maintain. BI, business intelligence. AM, asset management. PM, preventative maintenance. KPI, key performance indicator. And Sandbox. It's a test Maximo site where you get to try everything out and nothing's fixed. So let me tell you a little bit about Maximo's history at facilities at TTC. As far as I can tell, the system was first implemented around 1999. It was really used as a maintenance ticket system. There were no assets set up, there were no preventative maintenance schedules in place. It was really, this is broken, now it's fixed. Now, facilities and the TTC has made Maximo its corporate standard in 2018. But because Maximo has been rolled out over different groups over the last 2 decades, we have a really wide range of Maximo maturities. In 3 years, we've created 30,000 facilities assets. We currently have one group who started to use mobile devices. Facilities is actually rolling out mobile anywhere tablets in a month. And the future of Maximo in general at TTC, we're in the process of implementing SAP for our finance, and we just started to look at GIS integration and spatial assets for our bus stops. So to get any project started, you really have to convince someone that it's worth it to put that energy in. And for me, what did that was this roof condition pie chart. Our roofing technologists had done roof inspections every year for decades, and they were all sitting on the 4-person's office shelf. And you couldn't really get a sense of our roofs from looking at that binder. But this chart tells you right away, are most of our roofs in good condition? Have we seen most of our roofs this year? How many are in very poor condition? And you can even see that data change the longer you do it. Once my manager saw this, he could see the infinite possibilities. The whole project became worth it. So Maximo implementation in theory. So at the bottom, you have people. You build your processes with your people. And at the top, you have technology. Traditionally, a lot of people will say that this pyramid is actually technology at the bottom. And I'll tell you, I strongly disagree. You really have to build your system with your people in mind. In the end, they're actually your biggest asset. You have to make your system work for them, train them so that they're comfortable working with Maximo. Once your people are ready, you want to then build your processes. You want to really frame them out. write them down, solidify it, make sure everyone's on board, everyone understands what's expected. And then choose the right technology for your people. There is amazing technology out there, but just because it's out there doesn't mean it's right for your group. And then the data pyramid. So this was one of the things that I had a huge aha moment for. When I read about this, I couldn't believe it. It made so much sense, and I've been doing it my entire career, but I didn't actually understand it till I saw it. At the bottom is your master data. So all your lookup lists, all your assets, all your locations, your PMs, your job plans, you really have to build that basic data into your Maximo system. Once you have that, you can start to build transactions between PMs and assets, work orders and assets, work type and work orders. Every record you create in Maximo can build millions of transactions almost. But what you get out of that is the amazing business intelligence and reporting at the top. So in the end, you build all that master data and you build all those transactions so that you can get useful, usable data out of your system. And it's one of the biggest, I find, problems. People will find that they'll pour huge amounts of data and time and effort into Maximo and not get that asset information and knowledge back. So there's no point putting it in if you can't get it back out. So let me show you an example of the data pyramid. Here's a work order from our system. Anything you see in red is transactions. Anything you see in green is master data. So you thought about that master data, you built it into the system. And every time you create a work order, Maximo's generating the majority of that transaction for you. So now that we've talked about it in theory, let's talk more about Maximo implementation in practice. So the best place to start, I always found, was with management's pain points and expectations. Map your current processes. You'll have to make some big decisions. Plan your data structure and governance. Plan your data standards and governance. Create that master data. Really nail down your processes. Build Maximo procedures. Run your key performance indicators. And then train, and retrain. Let's start at the beginning. Management's pain points is one of the best places you can really generate buy-in from your end user, because management will tell you, usually off the bat, why they need Maximo. The way I do it now, I don't know. I don't know where I spend my money. I don't know if my floors are level and safe or if there's a trip hazard out there. I don't want someone to get hurt. They'll tell you what they don't know and what they're missing now. One of my favorites is only Jane Smith knows how to fix this. Jane Smith is about to retire in a year. What am I gonna do? So the expectations are usually Maximo will fix everything and it'll be super easy. And you really have to manage those expectations. You wanna get your stakeholders excited about the project, but understand that it's not a straight road to success. Map your current processes. So really sit down with the people who do it and ask them what they do. They'll tell you, and they'll tell you what they don't have now, what they're missing, what they'd like to have, how they think it could be improved. If they've done it all their life or for the last 5 years, they'll know without even thinking about it. And if you ask them and listen, they'll tell you. You'll have to make some big decisions about your Maximo system right off the bat, and they affect pretty much everything else you build from here on out. So really think about it and get it right the first time. To customize or not to customize your Maximo. Every time any organization goes through an implementation, you reach a point where an end user feels that Maximo won't meet their needs, or they can't see how Maximo will meet their needs for a business. And a lot of times the stakeholder will ask for customization. And I can tell you 95% of customization can be done through reporting. And the question isn't, can Maximo be customized to do it? Absolutely. The bigger question is, should it? Any customization risks not working after a major upgrade. It's more work for IT to maintain, and a lot of times just isn't worth it. Are you going to run a single site or a multi-site? So if you run multiple sites, you can set up different business rules, but it's almost like maintaining two systems. It's twice as much work. So really think it through before you decide. Define what an asset is. If you define this with your stakeholders off the bat, it'll make everyone's life easier going forward. Everyone will know what an asset is. Everyone will know whether this piece of equipment falls in that category or not. And what kind of BI are you going to use? How are you going to get your information back out? For us at facilities at TTC, it's Crystal reports. And technology. You don't have to decide this right away, but the sooner you know, the better it'll be. Do you see a potential for GIS integration down the road? Do you think you'll go mobile? Will you do it right away, or will you implement and then do mobile after? Think about it when you start. The big data structure is the asset hierarchy. What I can tell you is do it with your stakeholders and try it in your sandbox. I've heard about months of discussions and negotiations about asset hierarchies, but until your stakeholders go in and try it in your sandbox, they won't actually know if it's right for them, especially if they've never used Maximo before. I've seen people change their mind after trying it. So yes, have the meetings, and yes, talk to your stakeholders, but also have them try it in a sandbox. It'll save you a lot of time. And one of my golden rules is borrow from the best. Here's an example from the city of Windsor that I borrowed for when I started at TTC. It was a good starting place. I hadn't really looked at an organization as big as TTC before. So for me, it was a good place to start. I could build on top of it, take what worked, leave what didn't. Any questions so far?
Thanks, Emma, for the midway break on our presentation. I'm just going to give another minute or two and see if any questions pop in. So far, not a lot. There's been a bit of feedback that some of the screens in particular are tough to read, but we will have the presentation downloadable from the website, and I think that might be resolved there. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. Hopefully that you still got most of the content, but I'll wait a minute here and just see if any questions come into the question box. Okay, here's one for you, Emma. What mobile device is TTC using?
Hi, Craig. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you just great.
Okay, great. So at TTC, we didn't have a ton of choice for mobile because we do work in the tunnels with limited connectivity. By default, TTC will not consider a third-party software, so we pretty much had to go with anywhere. And I can tell you, I have 3 tablets in my home office right now.
Excellent. And another question that's just come in here is, why did any insight as to why TTC chose Maximo? We have a couple people kind of asking us a similar question. I mean, why Maximo? Did you guys consider other solutions? Was it the incumbent for some particular reason?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So as I said in the presentation, TTC has actually had Maximo since 1999. But up until 2018, any group could actually choose to implement any other software they thought worked for their group. It only became our corporate standard in 2018, and slowly all our groups are amalgamating. We chose Maximo, number one, it's best of breed. I've worked with JD Edwards and SAP. Yes, SAP is incredibly robust, but it is not user-friendly, and my users would run for the hills if they saw it. So it really had, and it also has the ability to be customized to fit our unique business needs.
Excellent. Great. One more here that came in through. How many Maximo users do you guys have, and how did you train them?
So TTC as a whole, I would guess probably, for sure over 1,000, probably heading to 5,000. So, and like right now I work in facilities. So right now I support all the staff in Maximo. With mobile rolling out, I'm about to go from supporting 30 users to 250 users. So we are literally expanding exponentially across the whole organization.
Great. And a couple more here that, and maybe I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, maybe the answer is more around what are you using, but the question is, does Maximo, our mobile Maximo, work best with iOS or with an Android?
I don't know is the answer.
Okay, no, and that's fine. That's fine too.
Yeah, Maximo, I'm working luckily with our end user devices, and tablets are their thing.
Yeah.
Maximo is my thing.
Got it. Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. And then one last one here, and then we'll kind of continue on with your presentation. And it says, do you have any Maximo add-ons? Like, do you use Maximo for transportation, an industry solution, or a Maximo add-on in addition to just core Maximo for your business?
TTC as a whole does have the transportation add-on.
Okay.
I personally in facilities don't use it. There are a few add-ons I would kill for, like change management, which I think comes with health and safety.
Yep.
But it definitely has, all those add-ons really give you a lot more flexibility than when I first started to use Maximo 15 years ago.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you so much, Emma. I think what we'll do is we'll continue with the presentation for those out there that have questions through the remaining part. Again, please just put those in the questions box. And once again, at the end of the presentation, we'll open it up to questions. So with that, we'll kick back into your presentation. Thanks, Emma.
The next stage is data structure and governance. This isn't about what the data is, it's how you want that data to look. What kind of information should be in a lookup box? What kind of information should be free text entry? If you want to add a value to that lookup list, who approves that? How do you change that going forward? And you want to future-proof it. If I'm not here tomorrow, who can do this and how do they do it? So the next stage is data standards and their governance. For example, what does an asset tag look like? How do you build it? Does it have a location identifier? Do you have to work with existing legacy tags? How many characters? You want to iron out as much of that as possible before you put a single asset in the system. So here's an example of data tags from TTC. We have a location identifier, an asset family identifier, and then a number. It's not super in-depth, but anyone who looks at a number that says 21Y knows that it's Shepherd Station. Next, you have to actually build all that master data now that you know what it's going to look like and what format it'll take. So you have to gather all your existing data sheets, your old inspections. If you walk through the process with your stakeholders, you've probably already seen most of your data. They have it, so a lot of times you've gathered this as you go. You want to validate older lists, tag the assets in the field, and then test each asset family in your sandbox before you enter thousands, because it's a lot easier to change 20 than 1,000. This was also one of the topics that really was an aha moment for me when I read it. Master data, especially for assets, really breaks down into 4 categories. You have tombstone. So this data never changes. It's a serial number. It'll go directly in the asset or a specification or a feature in Maximo. There's data that changes rarely. I say about 3 times or less in an asset's lifetime. So this is also a specification or a feature in Maximo. You have your snapshot data. So we're looking at stuff that changes 4 or more times in its lifetime, but you want to keep the history. So this is an inspection or a meter against your asset. And inspection results. You may want to keep the history of the value or not, but it's still a meter or an inspection. Once you've talked to all your stakeholders and amassed a massive amount of data that they already have, you have to talk to your stakeholders and be realistic about how much data you want to maintain, what data you're missing, and what it'll cost you to get it and keep it. So you really have to take all that data, monetize it, and then prioritize it. Really break down wants from needs, because every data will cost you something in the future. So let me show you an example from some of facilities assets. Here's a stair, actually, one of the first stair inspections I looked at. It's a basic form with 3 questions, the stair ID, and it didn't come with the drawings either. I had to look those up. What I convinced our tradespeople to do was to do this 1 year, a bigger, more in-depth inspection. It took them longer, it was more work, but I told them for every other time you go back to this asset, you won't have to guess if it's tile or terrazzo, you'll know. So you kind of get your stakeholders buy-in to put in some really big effort up front for payback down the road. And you can see here I've mapped tombstone data, data that changes rarely, and snapshots, and if I want the history or not. So the next year, my inspection form was a fraction of the size. All that work they'd done last year now pays off. And this is what my tombstone data looks like in Maximo. My specifications, those things that'll change 3 times or less usually, and all my meters or inspection results. So stuff I want a history on. And because I knew mobile applications were in our future, I also made it reporting and mobile friendly. So I did get a lot of pushback the first year when the inspections were longer. People complained. But every year since then, they like it because all the stairs are labeled now because we check it every year now. They know more about their stairs than they ever did before. And when we start to roll out mobile in a month, I have all the drawings attached to the assets in Maximo for them that will automatically download with every work order attached to that stair. It's information that TTC has always had, but has never been so available to them before so quickly. And this is the holy grail of asset Maximo master data, your reporting. At the end of all that work, we got another one of those amazing pie charts that showed us exactly where we were with all our station stairs. Station stairs are a huge safety concern for the public. So to know where we need to focus our efforts, what stations are in really good shape, and we could even skip a few years of inspections if we absolutely had to. But to have that information available to anyone with access to that asset provides all new possibilities and just better asset management decisions down the road. The next part, process, procedure, KPI. So if you sit down with your stakeholders and you really write down every step they do, they copy a folder from this one to that one, they print out a work order, they write, they fill in this data, really sit down with the people who do it. Then you build Maximo procedures. And then you run KPIs. So the only way you can really know if your process is working, does it need some tweaks, is to see if you're in control of it. Are you able to maintain your current levels? You don't know unless you can see it. So here's, for example, our work order process. And any box there that has a number, I have a corresponding procedure. If we have a new carpenter, Jane, who starts tomorrow and I'm off sick, She could pick up the process, pick up the procedures, and learn how to use Maximo. It's future-proof. And with KPIs, it really is the trend. It's not the number. Whether the number is 300 or the number is 500, what I care about is if it was 300 last week, are we still close to 300 this week? And no one expects perfection. No one will ever do 100% of anything. But what we want to know is it close? Are we in the ballpark? Are we still playing the same sport? Food for thought. If you know you're going to do mobile and you're going to roll out mobile right away, it's actually twice the work for implementation. So not only do you have to take your legacy data and map it to Maximo Desktop, but then you also have to map all those fields to your mobile device as well. Admittedly, if you're going to do mobile, you'll have to do the work eventually, but it doubles everything off the bat, and that's a big hill to climb right away. Another thing about mobile, are you looking at connected or offline use? Facilities, we do work in subway tunnels. We had no choice. We need a mobile device that's going to have to work offline. Right away, that limits you to some choices, and the sooner you know that, the better mobile decisions you can make. Track and create all your assets at the right level. I showed you the City of Windsor's asset hierarchy before. It's beautiful, and I wish I had that, but right now I'm an army of one. I can only create and track assets that I have the ability to maintain. I can't do any more. So even if I made the most beautiful assets in the world, if I can't maintain them and the information's not right, they are no good to our organization. And don't forget, Maximo has lots of other modules. Purchasing, we're starting to use it for time entry, attendance and time. It's really, the more modules you use in Maximo, the better and the richer your asset information and knowledge will be. And I would like to take this time to impart to you some lessons I have learned through some tough mistakes. Implementation should be from the top down, but to the end user, it should feel from the bottom up. You need that consensus from management and that support, but, and this comes to lesson 2, your results will always be proportional to your approval. So if Joe or Jane gave you input on how the process or the procedure should be, they will want to do it because you listened to them. It's the only way you will get the best data from your people who are the base of your Maximo pyramid, right? They're the most valuable asset in Maximo. Sole source of truth. There's a million ways that you can store all your data. Your life will always be easier with fewer systems. If you can stick that data in Maximo, do it. Don't make a side access table, don't keep a separate Excel sheet, combine it all, that way everyone has access to it. If there are security concerns, you can do that with security groups, but keep it all in Maximo so that you do have those links already built in. KPIs are a carrot, not a stick. If you take your KPIs and keep whacking people on the head with them, you're not going to get any cooperation. So really try and help the people who you're monitoring with the KPIs to do better. Even if you know the answer, ask the question. I see your backlog of Maximos are increasing. Is it a backlog of work or is it a backlog to close? It'll tell you whether it's a process problem or a behavioral problem. It also helps people understand, and even if you offer a tiny bit of help, do you want me to send you the procedure again? Do you want to review it tomorrow? I have an availability at 10. People will always appreciate that you're trying to help and it's not just for pointing fingers. There are lots of free resources on the internet. Use them all and borrow from the best. Everyone's done this before me. I was not the first and I won't be the last, and make it work for you. Try it in the sandbox. Don't guess, know. whatever you think, until your stakeholders try it in your sandbox, they won't really know either, especially if they've never used Maximo. So start with it, get your end users to try it, take that feedback and try again, because you only want to do it once in production. For TTC, Maximo has really been a gateway to digital transformation. When I started at TTC, we were using a fax machine. In a month, we're about to start training on tablets. It's literally been a digital gateway. Once you start with one technology, you see the potential for all the other technologies, and you start to see that positive feedback, the return on your efforts. So just make sure you choose the right next digital gateway for your team. Any questions?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Emma, for the presentation. I think it was very comprehensive, informative, and the video work was awesome. There's some questions that have come in here. I'll try to get to you one. And if you have any questions, please submit them in the question box, and I'll try my best to transfer that to Emma so that she can best answer it. One of the questions here, Emma, was how many hours of training per staff is usually required?
That's an excellent question. And what I can tell you is it depends on your organization and your computer literacy of your end user. Kind of the 4 people and supervisors, I can cover most new Maximo processes in under an hour. I try to refresh training. I aim for once a year. Realistically, I like to check in with users at least every 6 months, see if there's anything they're struggling with or want help with. Our technicians are a little more computer literacy challenged, so I've actually had to break our training into 3 sessions. So I do one session to log into a computer and open email. I kid you not. One session on how to actually use email, and then one session for Maximo. So it really, again, it really links to your people. But the more you train and the more people know you, the more willing they'll be to come to you with problems and ask for help. So it's the first place I've actually had to tell people that if you can't figure it out in 10 minutes, call me. Because people, I had users with problems and they just wouldn't tell me. They assumed it was them.
Excellent. No, and I like your approach of kind of providing some pre-training for those folks that aren't in front of a computer all day, like maybe you and I are, right? So I think that's a really interesting way to cover it. One here, not really a question, from Steve Cook. He just said, "Wow, that was excellent." So just some solid feedback. Steve's gushing over your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we've got a question here from Joyce. It says, does your Maximo have an integration with any other applications? So you have any active integrations between Maximo and other systems?
Ooh, I have a super fun integration coming up in 2021 that Maximo geeks like me are super stoked about. I am doing an integration with ArcGIS for all our 10,000 plus bus stops. So maybe next year's presentation.
Perfect. We might hold you to that. A question here from Frank. He says, were you able to determine how you would measure your KPIs in the new system prior to your go live dates, or was this something that you had to work towards?
Yeah, and picking, and even I still struggle with this sometimes, picking the right KPIs and information for that specific audience. And it's one of the things I kind of glossed over as well. And anyone who's here now, feel free to reach out to me offline and I'll answer any questions you have. I guess the way I've always done it while implementing is, so for each individual process, I literally sat down and wrote out every KPI I could think of, everything that I thought the manager down to a tradesperson would want to know. And I picked the best I thought to start. And as your maximum maturity changes, your KPIs change too. So I used to just look at number of, for example, open work orders. However, now I look at open work orders by work type and by status and by crew. I look at the ones that were closed in the last week. I look at data completeness on those work orders that were closed. So how many had assets, failure codes. I look at how many were duplicates and no trouble found, because it tells us ways that we can improve our physical work process. If I'm spending time going to calls that I can't figure out, that's time I could use better. So the more you do it, the better you get at it. But nothing's fixed, right? You get better as you go.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Ryan asked kind of a bit of a three-part question, but what version did you implement? What like major apps did you go live with? So probably what did you start with? And then did you keep them mostly out of the box or did you customize them? So there's kind of three parts to it.
Okay. I literally so I just had to retrain all my users because we upgraded to 7.6.1. So I had to go back out in COVID times and train as many people virtually, but I still had to go out to some users in person. And I had to reproduce all my training material, but it makes it future-proof, so it was worth it. I can tell you the first version I ever implemented was 4 something. So I've been with Maximo a long time. Sorry, what was the second part?
Second part was just major apps. Like you touched on a few in your presentation, obviously work orders, assets, locations, like what kind of
preventative maintenance, planning. I've started to use, so even though my actual warehouse is in a separate software, there are some assets where I use items so that I can better represent the cost of those to manage.
Oh, I see. So it hits the work order.
And it's one of those things, the fewer systems you have, the better. If you can stick it in there, save yourselves, do it now. Because integrations make it tricky. It's not as seamless. And the last part?
And the last part was just, was it mostly out of the box screens or like were you guys customizing them?
So I've seen no customization, and at TTC, we love customization. So we've done a lot of customization. Please learn from my mistakes. Please don't. Or customize as little as you need to. And I mean, everyone's definition of customization is different. So for example, we have a customization that automatically puts in the right GL account on our work orders. Right. That is worth it. We have some customizations that aren't worth it.
Right.
So really think hard. I mean, Maximo is so flexible. There's literally a million ways to do just about anything. So really consider all the possibilities.
That's the old, the best thing about Maximo is it's easy to customize, and the worst thing about Maximo is that it's easy to customize, right? So.
Yes, so we were stuck, actually. It took us a long time to get to version 7 anything because we had so much customization. So it actually became a Maximo hindrance to us.
Yeah, exactly. How many trainers were there on site for Maximo questions? I'm assuming Artie's question is more around the actual deployment time. Like, were there people on site available?
So for my 30 users now and future 250 users, you're speaking to the one and only trainer. and I'm not kidding.
Okay. So that,
But it's one of the things that people and all organizations are really do this the same way. I've seen it in every industry. They come, they implement, and they leave. And it's one of the things that training is really undervalued, and a lot of people don't think that far down the road, but you'll always have a new foreperson or a new supervisor, a new tech. You'll always have to be training. And if you want your maximum maturity to increase, you not only need to keep maintaining your current processes, but you want to be able to change them and improve them, and that will take more training.
right. Yep. No, excellent. Thank you. And then Heidi asks, I mean, do your contractors have access to Maximo? Like, are they closing their work orders and entering their time on the work order, or just your internal employees?
Right now it's just us, but there is no, like, I don't see why not if we have consistent contractors. I'm public sector, so it's a little trickier, I'll say. Like we have to go out and check we're still paying the lowest price every 5 years. So even if I train someone now, I might have to train someone else in 5 years.
Right.
But if you're private sector, it might be a little easier.
Okay. Yep. Excellent. And then last one, I think from Yogesh, I hope I got that right. Well, moving from 7609.10 to the 7611 version, what did you have to change for the end users, and how did you handle that? Like, was there a lot of change you had to deal with in that?
It was a good experience for me. I remember when Maximo went from blue to black and all my users freaked out. They couldn't find anything because it was black now. And so because everything went back to blue, I really prepared for the worst. I went around to everyone before. I showed all my users our test site so they knew what it would look like. I put training together side by side, old to new. And even some of my techs who I remember, I had to send them a picture of Control Alt Delete because they didn't know how to do it. They handled the upgrade like pro stars. So you never know. Sometimes your end users will surprise you.
Awesome. Very good.
But
and then one last,
I guess trained before. So, because every once in a while you'll get a surprise and you'll get panic.
Awesome. And then one last just comment from Denise, also saying excellent presentation, and I think that's probably a great way to wrap this up. So yeah, Emma, this was a fantastic presentation. Very appreciate your time and effort to pull this together, and like I mentioned, I'm very impressive on some of the video transitions and kind of getting a bit behind the scenes. So thank you very much for that. And we will probably package up these questions, get them to you if you wanted to keep in touch with any of these folks. And then we will, of course, package all of this up and send out links. So if you want to download it and look at it at your own time, that's fine as well. So thank you very, very much again, Emma. And we're going to move into the rebroadcast.